The text came in at 2 a.m. while I was on a work trip in Seattle. Mom finally did something with your house. Please. I stared at the message on my phone, the screen the only light in the dark hotel room. The house. My house in Alexandria. That 3-bedroom colonial I'd bought 2 years ago. The property I'd carefully chosen to be exactly 15 minutes from the federal district court and 20 minutes from my office at the U.S. Marshals Service headquarters. I typed back with thumbs that felt clumsy. What do you mean, did something? Did what? Mom sold it. You're never there anyway. Always traveling for your job. The money will help your sister with her wedding. I sat up so fast I nearly dropped the phone. You sold my house? Mom, don't be dramatic. We have the power of attorney you left when you were overseas. We used it. The house was just sitting empty. $850,000 cash. Your father and I split the money with Sarah to pay for her wedding. You can thank us at the family gathering next week. My hands were shaking. The power of attorney. The one I'd drawn up 6 years ago when I was in Afghanistan, before joining the Marshals. A document I'd completely forgotten about and never revoked after I returned stateside. Mom, you need to stop the sale immediately. Too late. The deal closed yesterday. Stop being selfish. Family helps family. I didn't bother responding to that. I immediately called my boss, Deputy Chief Marshal Timothy Crawford. He picked up on the third ring, his voice hoarse with sleep. Mitchell, it's the middle of the night. Sir, we have a problem. My family just sold my house in Alexandria. A pause. Then, your house? The safe house. Yes, sir. God damn it. The one we're using for witness protection. The Castellano case. The pause was even longer this time. I could hear him shifting in bed, probably sitting up now, fully awake. When did this happen? They closed the deal yesterday. I had just found out. Who's in that house now? According to the latest protection detail report, Amanda Morenti and her 2 children are supposed to stay there for another 3 weeks before relocation. And your family sold a federal safe house to whom? I don't know yet, sir. Mitchell, get back to Washington immediately. I'm activating the emergency response team. We need to evacuate Morenti and figure out what the hell happened. I caught the first flight out of Seattle. When the plane landed at Reagan National, it was 10 a.m. and my phone showed 17 new messages from my mom. All in the same vein. Why are you being so dramatic? You're ruining Sarah's wedding. I ignored them all and headed straight to the U.S. Marshals Service headquarters in Arlington. Deputy Chief Marshal Crawford was waiting for me in a secure conference room with 3 senior marshals and our legal counsel. The atmosphere was tense, the kind of urgency that settles into bones and stays there. Sit down, Crawford said, pointing to a chair. Tell us everything. I explained the situation methodically, the power of attorney I'd forgotten to revoke, my parents' access to it, the sale of the house without my knowledge or consent. As I spoke, I watched their expressions shift from concern to furious. The kind of fury that's quiet and dangerous. Legal counsel Catherine Williams, a woman who'd spent 20 years prosecuting organized crime, leaned forward. Let me get this straight, she said slowly. Your parents sold a property that for the last 18 months has been designated as a federal safe house. A house currently housing a protected witness and her family in the Castellano organized crime case. A house with an active security detail assigned to it. And they did this without notifying anyone. Yes, ma'am. Who bought the house? I don't know yet. Mom mentioned an $850,000 cash price, which is significantly below market value. Crawford's jaw tightened. $850,000 cash for a house worth at least $2.8 million. That's either absolute incompetence or something much worse. Williams turned her laptop screen toward us. I'm looking at the property records now. The sale went through a company called Riverside Holdings LLC. She fixed me with a steady gaze. Does that name mean anything to you? No, ma'am, I replied. She typed quickly, her fingers moving with practiced efficiency. Riverside Holdings is a shell company registered in Delaware. The owners are hidden behind several layers of intermediaries. She looked up, and I felt the temperature in the room drop. Mitchell, this wasn't an ordinary real estate transaction. The room felt cold despite the recycled government air. Are you saying someone specifically targeted this house? I asked quietly. I'm saying someone paid cash, below market value, for a house that coincidentally shelters a witness against the Castellano family. She paused, letting the weight of it settle. That's not a coincidence. Crawford stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. We evacuate Marenti immediately. Mitchell, you're with me. He turned to Williams. Start digging into Riverside Holdings. I want to know who owns them and how they found out about this house. We arrived at the house in Alexandria with a tactical team 20 minutes later. Marshal Service Protection Officers Rodriguez and Chin met us at the door, their expressions shifting from professional alertness to outright confusion. Sir, what's going on? Rodriguez asked. We weren't notified of any schedule change. The house has been sold, Crawford said flatly. Without authorization. We're evacuating the witnesses now. Rodriguez's hand instinctively went to his weapon. Sold. How? Family issue, I replied quietly, the words tasting bitter. Mrs. Marenti and the kids inside? Yeah, they're having lunch. We entered quickly, spreading through the living room with practiced efficiency. Amanda Marenti looked up from the kitchen table where she sat with her 8-year-old daughter and 6-year-old son, ordinary peanut butter sandwiches between them. Her face went pale the moment she saw so many marshals, the color draining like water from a sink. What happened? Her voice cracked. Did they find us? No, ma'am, Crawford said, his tone carefully calm. But we're moving you as a precaution. You have 10 minutes to pack essentials. Marshal Rodriguez will help you. Amanda stood, trembling. But you said it was safe here. You promised. She pulled her children closer, one hand on each small shoulder. I know what we said, Mrs. Marenti, and I apologize. Crawford's voice held genuine regret. There's been a complication with the property. We're taking you somewhere more secure. While Rodriguez helped Amanda gather their belongings, Crawford turned to me. Your parents, where are they now? At a family gathering on my uncle's farm in Pennsylvania. They're expecting me tomorrow. Change of plans. His jaw was set. We're going today. Bring a recorder. We need to document everything they say. We drove to Pennsylvania in a convoy of 3 unmarked cars, Crawford, me, Marshal Williams from legal, and 4 tactical support officers. My uncle's farm sat on 50 acres of rolling hills near Harrisburg, a place that had held childhood memories of hayrides and Thanksgiving dinners. When we arrived, it was late afternoon, and the party was in full swing. Cars lined the long gravel driveway. Kids ran across the yard, their laughter carrying on the warm breeze. The smell of barbecue drifted from the back patio, and I could hear music playing somewhere inside. I stepped out of the car and walked toward my family, knowing that everything was about to change. My mother stood by the grill, chatting animatedly with aunts and laughing, a pair of tongs waving in her hand as she told some story. She spotted me crossing the lawn, and her face lit up with that familiar welcome home smile. She waved happily. Then she saw the people in suits walking beside me, the badges on their belts, the careful, watchful postures. Her smile vanished. The color drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint. Carol. Her voice came out small. Carol, what's going on? I walked across the lawn, Crawford beside me, the grass soft under my feet. My father came out of the house, beer bottle in hand, his expression shifting from curiosity to confusion to something darker as he took in the scene. Sarah appeared from around the corner, her fiancé trailing behind her, both of them still smiling until they saw our faces. Mom, Dad, I began carefully. We need to talk about the house. Oh, for heaven's sake. Mom threw up her hands, relief flickering across her face. You're still angry about that? We did you a favor. That house was a federal safe house, I interrupted. The words landed like stones in still water. The laughter around us died. Mom's face went white. What? The house in Alexandria, I said. The one you sold without my permission. It wasn't just my house. It was designated as federal property used for the Witness Protection Program. Dad slowly set his bottle on the table, his knuckles white against the glass. That can't be, he said. You said you worked in an administrative division. I'm a deputy U.S. Marshal. I held his gaze. For 4 years now. That house was purchased specifically for its location and security features. It's been a safe house for a protected witness for the last 18 months. Crawford stepped forward, holding up his badge. Deputy Chief Marshal Timothy Crawford. Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, you sold federal property without authorization. Furthermore, you may have endangered the life of a protected witness. Mom grabbed Dad's arm, her fingers digging in. We didn't know. Carol, you never told us. I couldn't. The words came out harder than I intended. For operational security reasons, I am not permitted to discuss active cases or safe house addresses with anyone outside the service. But you should have at least asked me before selling my property. We had the power of attorney, Mom argued, her voice rising. That power of attorney was intended only for emergencies during my military service 6 years ago. It did not give you the right to sell my house. Sarah stepped forward, her face flushed. Carol, Mom and Dad were just trying to help. They got me $400,000 for the wedding. You can't be mad about that. The money for your wedding came from the illegal sale of federal property, I replied evenly. Those funds will be seized as proceeds of a crime. Crime? Dad's voice rose. Hold on. We didn't commit any crime. We just sold your house that you weren't using anyway. You're always traveling, always working. You're never around for family. What were we supposed to think? I felt something cold settle in my chest. You were supposed to think that selling someone else's property without direct permission is illegal, I said. And when it involves federal property, it's far more serious. William stepped forward, his presence calm and authoritative. Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, he said evenly, I represent the legal division of the U.S. Marshals Service. The house you sold legally belonged to your daughter, but was designated as federal property and used within the Witness Protection Program. Selling this property without proper authorization violates Statute 18 U.S.C. 1512, witness tampering by hindering communication. We didn't forge anything. Mom cried out, her voice shrill with fear. We had the power of attorney. A power of attorney that you knew was outdated and no longer legally valid, Williams continued without pause. And the fact that the house was sold significantly below market value through a shell company raises additional questions. Shell company? Dad frowned, genuinely confused. We sold the house to a nice couple through a realtor. They paid $850,000 cash. The buyers used a firm called Riverside Holdings, I said. Do you have any idea who they really are? Some investors, Dad replied. The agent said they wanted to rent the house out. A cash purchase at $850,000 for a house worth $2.8 million didn't raise any red flags? I asked. We're not real estate experts. Mom broke in. Her voice pleading now. The agent said it was a fair price for a quick sale. At that moment, Crawford's phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen, and his expression darkened instantly. Mitchell, need a word privately. We stepped away from the family, crossing the lawn until the sounds of the party faded to background noise. Crawford turned his phone screen toward me. The photo showed 2 men. One I didn't recognize, heavy-set, middle-aged, forgettable. The other I knew instantly. Thomas Castellano Jr., son of the crime boss Amanda Morenti, was testifying against. His face had been on briefing documents for 18 months. His associates had killed Amanda's husband. Riverside Holdings, Crawford said quietly. A shell company owned by the Castellano family. They bought your house. They knew it was the safe house. I felt cold inside, a deep bone cold that had nothing to do with temperature. How? We're still figuring that out. Crawford's voice was grim. But they paid cash, below market value, obviously to make the deal look tempting and push it through quickly. He paused, letting the weight settle. Your parents' greed made them easy targets. I turned and looked back at my family. They stood in a tight group on the lawn, Mom wringing her hands, Dad with his arm around her, Sarah crying softly, her fiancé looking lost. The aunts and uncles had gathered at a careful distance, sensing something terrible unfolding. They had no idea. None at all. I walked back toward them. Who approached you about selling the house? I asked. What? Mom blinked, caught off guard by the question. A realtor. Surely something. She said she already had buyers. But you didn't list the house for sale. How did she know you could act on it? She called. Mom's voice was defensive now. Said she'd heard we had property in Alexandria we might want to sell. Heard from whom? Mom and Dad exchanged a glance, something passing between them that I couldn't read. Then Mom's shoulders shifted in a half shrug. I might have mentioned it at the country club, she admitted. We were discussing Sarah's wedding expenses, and someone said we had assets we could sell. I mentioned you had a house you weren't using. Crawford closed his eyes, exhaling heavily. When he opened them, his gaze was flat. Mrs. Mitchell, you discussed your daughter's federal property at a country club? And how many people heard this? I don't know. Mom's voice pitched higher. It was just conversation. Just friends. Those friends told someone, Crawford said grimly. They passed the information to the Castellanos, and the Castellanos sent a front agent to convince you to sell them the safe house. My father's face went ashen, the color draining until he looked like a man who'd seen a ghost. Are you saying we helped the mob? He choked out. Inadvertently, yes, Williams replied. You sold them direct access to a protected witness. Sarah grabbed my arm, her fingers cold against my skin. Carol, we didn't know. Believe us. We would never, ever. Would never what? I interrupted, pulling my arm away. Would never think I might have reasons for secrecy? Would never consider that my job might be more important than you assumed? That's not fair. Sarah's voice cracked. Isn't it? I said coldly. You took the wedding fund money, didn't you? $400,000 from the house sale. For what? A bigger venue? A more expensive dress. Sarah's cheeks flushed deep red. Mom and Dad offered. They said you owed us, that you're never around, never part of family things. They said it was your contribution. I looked at her for a long moment, then at my parents, then back at Sarah. When I spoke, my voice was quiet enough that they had to lean in to hear. My contribution, I said, was buying a house that saved 3 lives. Amanda Morenti and her 2 children are alive only because they were in that safe house, not in their apartment, when Castellano's people came to kill them. I paused, letting the words settle. That's my contribution to something that actually matters. Silence stretched across the lawn like something physical. Heavy and suffocating. Somewhere in the distance, children still laughed, chasing each other through the late afternoon sun, completely unaware of what was unfolding just a few hundred feet away. Crawford's phone vibrated. He answered, listened to a brief message, and disconnected. When he looked up, something in his posture eased fractionally. Morenti is safe, he announced. They've been moved to a new location. The house in Alexandria is being swept for listening devices now. He glanced at his phone again. We have a warrant. He nodded to the tactical agents. 2 of them detached from the group and approached my parents with the kind of practiced calm that comes from delivering bad news for a living. Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell, we have a warrant to seize all funds obtained from the sale of the house in Alexandria, one informed them. This includes bank accounts, cash, and any assets purchased with that money. Mom recoiled as if she'd been struck. What? You can't. That's our money. It's proceeds from the illegal sale of federal property, Williams said calmly. Furthermore, you are both being charged under Statute 18 U.S.C. 1512, witness tampering by hindering communication, and Statute 18 U.S.C. 641, theft of government property. You will need to go through formal processing. Carol. Dad turned to me desperately, his eyes wet. Carol, stop this. Tell them it's a misunderstanding, that we didn't mean any harm. I looked at him for a long moment. This man who had taught me to ride a bike, who had walked me down the aisle at my wedding, who had held my mother's hand through every difficulty life threw at them. He looked old now. Broken. Dad, you sold a safe house to the mob. My voice was steady, though I felt anything but. Whether you meant harm or not, you endangered 3 lives. I can't stop this. And I wouldn't, even if I could. We're your parents, Mom whispered, tears streaming down her face. Amanda Morenti is a mother too, I replied quietly. A mother of 2 children who watched Castellano's men kill her husband. Because of your actions, she almost died too. I held her gaze. So no, I'm not going to stop this. That evening, my parents were taken into custody. I watched from the porch as they were led to the unmarked cars, Mom crying, Dad walking with his head bowed. Sarah's bank accounts were frozen before the weekend ended. The $400,000 wedding fund was seized as evidence. Her fiancé left 2 days later, mumbling something about needing time to think. The investigation into Riverside Holdings unfolded quickly after that. It led to the arrest of 3 Castellano associates and exposed a network of corrupt realtors the mob had been using to track federal properties. They had been systematically trying to identify safe houses along the entire East Coast. My parents' carelessness, their eagerness to sell, their failure to ask a single meaningful question, it had given the Castellanos exactly what they were looking for. Amanda Morenti and her children were relocated to a protected safe house in another state. She testified against Thomas Castellano Sr. 6 months later, her testimony delivered via secure video link from an undisclosed location. He received a life sentence in federal prison. His son, Thomas Jr., was sentenced to 20 years for witness intimidation and related crimes. None of that brought me comfort. None of it undid what my parents had done. It only meant that their mistake hadn't cost 3 innocent people their lives. 6 months later, my parents' trial took place in the federal courthouse in Alexandria. I sat in the back row, watching the proceedings with the same professional detachment I brought to every witness protection case. The courtroom was nearly empty, just the judge, the attorneys, the jury, and a few curious onlookers who'd probably wandered in off the street. They were found guilty on both counts: witness tampering by hindering communication and theft of government property. My father received 4 years in federal prison. My mother received 3 years incarceration and 2 years supervised release afterward. The judge, a woman who'd spent decades on the bench, looked directly at them as she pronounced sentence. "Ignorance is not an excuse," she said, "when your actions nearly cost people their lives." Sarah lost everything. The money was gone, seized as evidence, and eventually forfeited. The wedding venue deposit was non-refundable. Her fiancé, the man who'd promised to love her forever, left 2 days after the trial ended. The last I heard, she'd moved to Oregon to live with our aunt, putting 2,000 miles between herself and the wreckage. I visited my parents once before they were transported to their respective prisons. They sat across from me in the Federal Detention Center visiting room, both in orange jumpsuits, separated by a scratched plexiglass divider and a lifetime of choices. They looked aged 10 years since that family gathering in Pennsylvania. "Carol." Mom pressed her hand against the glass. "Please, isn't there anything you can do? Talk to someone. Your father has health problems." "Mom, I'm a federal marshal," I replied. "I can't interfere with a federal prosecution. But we're family. Family respects boundaries." I kept my voice level. Family asks permission. Family doesn't sell each other's houses to the mob. Dad's hands trembled on the table on his side of the glass. "We didn't know it was the mob. We didn't know it was a safe house. We didn't know anything because you never told us what you actually do." I couldn't tell you. I met his eyes. "And as you can see, I was right not to trust you with confidential information. You couldn't handle ordinary property. So this is our punishment?" Mom's voice cracked. "Prison for just trying to help our daughter with her wedding? You were trying to help yourselves." The words came out cold, and I didn't try to warm them. "The money you used wasn't yours. Amanda Morenti is alive only because we evacuated her in time. If Castellano's people had found her first, if she and her children had died, you'd be facing murder charges right now." I paused. "For years in prison is a light outcome." Dad's face crumpled completely. Tears ran down his cheeks, and he made no effort to wipe them away. "When we get out, you'll forgive us. Take us back. Pretend this never happened." His voice broke. "We're your parents, Carol." I looked at them for a long moment. These 2 people who had raised me, who had taught me right from wrong, who had somehow forgotten every lesson they'd ever given. "You are my parents," I said quietly. "But that doesn't mean I have to forget what you did. You are now federal inmates who jeopardized the witness protection program because you were too selfish and careless to ask a single question before selling my house." I stood up, the chair scraping against the floor. "I hope you use your time to think about consequences. Real consequences. Not just what happened to you, but what could have happened to 3 innocent people because of your actions." I walked out without looking back. 2 years later, I received a letter from my mother. It arrived on a Tuesday, tucked between a utility bill and a credit card offer. The return address showed she had been transferred to a minimum security facility in West Virginia. I recognized her handwriting immediately, the same loopy cursive that had written my lunchbox notes in elementary school. 8 pages. Apologies, explanations, justifications. She missed me. She wanted to make things right. She claimed she finally understood her mistake. The words blurred together after a while, a familiar litany of sorrow and self-excuse. I read the letter once, carefully, then filed it with the case documents where it belonged. Later that day, Deputy Chief Crawford stopped by my office, coffee in hand, leaning against the doorframe the way he did when he wanted to talk, but didn't want to make it official. "Heard your mother wrote," he said. "Wants reconciliation. You going to give her that chance?" I thought about Amanda Morenti, who had sent me a card last Christmas with a photo of her children. They were smiling, gap-toothed, and happy. They were alive. They were safe because I had gotten them out of that house in time. "No," I said. "I'm not. Family's important, Mitchell. So is doing your job well." I set down the file I'd been reading. So is protecting those who can't protect themselves. So is maintaining boundaries with people who have proven they can't be trusted. Crawford nodded slowly, something like respect in his eyes. "Fair enough. You know, you handled this situation far more professionally than I would have." "It wasn't personal, sir." "No?" He raised an eyebrow. I met his gaze. "It was completely personal. But that doesn't change the fact that they broke federal law and endangered federal witnesses. Personal feelings don't override duty." "True," he agreed. "They don't. My parents were released from federal prison 18 months ago. Mom served her full sentence. Dad got out 2 months early for good behavior. They moved to Florida, far from the judgmental stares of their Pennsylvania neighbors, to a retirement community where no one knew their name or their story. Periodically, they write birthday cards, holiday letters, each one asking to talk, to explain, to rebuild the relationship. Each one a small wound I choose not to reopen. I haven't responded to any of them. Maybe someday I will. Maybe someday enough time will pass that I can separate who they are from what they did. Maybe someday I can sit across from them at a dinner table without seeing Amanda Morenti's frightened face the day we evacuated her from that house. Maybe someday the memory of her children's terror will fade enough that I can look at my own parents without feeling that cold knot in my chest. But not today. Today I have work. Witnesses to protect. Cases to manage. People who depend on the U.S. Marshals Service to stay alive, to avoid those who want them dead. And I can't do that job if I'm spending energy on relatives for whom $850,000 mattered more than respecting my boundaries, my property, or the lives of 3 strangers. So I keep working. I keep protecting witnesses. I keep upholding the professional standards my parents' actions nearly destroyed. If that makes me seem cold, ruthless, if that makes me a bad daughter, I can live with that. Amanda Morenti's children are alive. They go to school. They make friends. They laugh and fight and grow. That matters more than my parents' feelings. And it always will.